It's Maritza here on 103.1, your radio station, The Wellbeing Show, and on 3TFM. My special guest today is an international voice and singing coach. Per Bristow, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, wow, that's quite a lot, voice and singing coach. So what kind of things does that involve?
So singing is a fascinating instrument, or using the voice is pretty fascinating, whether we sing or we speak. And we all want to communicate. We all want to have an impact in the world somehow. And singing is one of those activities that brings with us so many health benefits. And it's that thing that bonds people. It's quite a wonderful activity. And it's interesting that it also brings with it an enormous amount of fears many times.
Yes, so tell us a bit about that, because I think, a lot of people listening will be thinking, do you know what, I sing in the shower in the morning and it's all good. But if you were to say to them, get on stage and sing on your own, a lot of them would probably be like, unless it was karaoke and they were maybe on a night out having a good time, they would be like, no, I can't do that.
Right.
So what is it about singing, do you think, that brings up that fear in people?
Exactly. What is that? It's such a wonderful activity. Feels so good in some situations, and then it's so scary in some situations. And there's been these surveys also that public speaking is a bigger fear than death. So what is that? Well, of course, we all know what it is really. It really is that we're afraid of being judged. We're afraid that we're not good enough. And that is really a very, very primal need to fit in, to be loved, and we all want that. And that's whatever we do, we don't want to be humiliated, we don't want to be judged. And that's why it's so important to actually become engaged in an activity such as this. And a lot of my work then is to be able to not sing much better, which you can. It's a skill and you can develop it very, very effectively and quite dramatically. But it's also then how do we turn these fears, these restrictions that we have, and become freer, more confident, more alive. We become more spontaneous. We feel better. We can communicate better with other people. When we become more charismatic, we become more influential, frankly. And that's sort of part of my work then, to actually free the human being. And then we can argue it really doesn't come down to being able to sing some pretty notes. It's much deeper than that. And that's why it becomes so powerful.
So you talked about the fear of kind of being judged. Would you say that that's the main reason why people maybe don't sing out with the shower or out with the house? Or do you think that's the main reason for that?
Absolutely. And of course, singing in the shower is actually good because you have the humidity and you often have good acoustics. So it's a great place to sing.
Got to sound good. Right. And also, when it comes to the speaking side of things, a lot of people might not think of it in terms of singing, but maybe in their everyday lives, be it just talking to friends, family, people that have got anxiety issues, even speaking, or, maybe just even speaking in front of a few people scares them, not only because they worry what people think, but they feel they can't get their voice out there. They're not loud enough, they don't project well enough.
That's right. And we all have different backgrounds, and a lot of people have grown up with the idea that the child should be seen and not heard, where we adapt and we keep quiet, and maybe we have been in situations where speaking up feels uncomfortable and we've been pushed down somehow or shut down. So I think we all have these kind of experiences in life when we have felt that we should be quiet and we should not be heard. So that's part of it, and that, of course, may have served us back then, because that's a way of surviving and fitting in to the situation. But it doesn't serve us anymore. So that's also why skill is so important. And then the physical aspects of the voice is so important there, because if we have become habitually used to holding back and having restrictions, well, that affects the physicality of the voice. So if I talk like this, and even if I want to be heard, there's so much stress in trying to create sound. Well, maybe I have like a breathy voice like this, and now if I talk like this, I of course come across as being afraid, timid, right? And so which comes first? It goes hand in hand. So it's very, very powerful to develop strength and functionality of the voice so that the voice vibrates freer with less tension. There's so many muscles inside of here, just from a physical standpoint, that get all locked up, and we can feel that. And it's not that hard, really, to isolate muscles and develop muscles. The problem is that we can't see these, so we want to get good at feeling them. And when we can release that, so the vocal cords become stronger, or the voice becomes stronger, the breathing becomes freer, it resonates better. Well, the resonance of our voice goes hand in hand in how we resonate with other people. If we have a forced voice, it becomes restricted, and then it becomes a forceful personality. If we have a held back voice, timid voice, well, then it goes hand in hand with a timid personality. So it's very, very powerful to train the voice so it becomes freer, so you have more dynamics. You can actually project without having to be forceful, and therefore you now become a much more powerful communicator. And that's, of course, important in every situation in life.
So what would be the number one mistake, perhaps, that people would make if they are in a situation where they have to project? They don't feel they have a very strong voice, and then they try and maybe shout out a bit. What is the best way of overcoming that?
My answer would be to train, but that becomes a silly answer, because then you wonder, okay, well, how do I train? But shall we talk a little bit about the anatomy of the voice, or do you want to?
Yeah, great, fantastic.
All right, but inside of here we have these things that are known as vocal cords or vocal folds, and the interesting thing is that we have two of them, right? So when we breathe, they're actually apart from each other, and all the air passes between these vocal cords. There's no sound, there's no vibration, and in order to create sound, they have to come together and vibrate together. So the difference between and is just that the vocal cords come together and vibrate. So if I, for example, have this kind of voice, and now I try to project, I want to become louder. Hello, can you hear me? And how's that voice? And then I lose my voice. And that is because the vocal cords are actually open, and you're blowing the cords apart, and suddenly you have no voice whatsoever. So if you have a weak voice, as soon as you get a little bit of a cold or you have an allergy, you're going to be susceptible to losing your voice. So if that happens to you, you know also what happens to you psychologically. Suddenly you become afraid. You can't project. You have to work harder, and your personality is affected. Right? So I don't want to give quick tips, but so that we understand that there's actually a way that we can actually help that, and therefore it helps then our personality. And everyone who has had a voice problem or gotten sick or lost their voice, we know how that affects us. We can't communicate. You can't be you.
So I know you said you don't have any quick tips, but do you have any tips? Something I get. Maybe it's long as a piece of string, but is there something that people that are listening could take from this today that could help them in situations where they need to perhaps project a little bit better, to be able to do that? Something, maybe an exercise or something.
Well, everything starts with awareness. So it's nice to become aware of, do I tend to have a little bit of a husky, breathy voice? Or do I tend to have more of a strangled voice? That's at least something to become aware of. And then realize that is just because it's habitual. It's not because it's natural. It's just because you've been used to doing that for a long time. So just the awareness is actually very, very helpful. Now what's interesting about the voice, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I'm trying to be helpful here. But the problem with people's awareness of the voice, or what we think about the voice, is as soon as we get a problem, people think, what am I supposed to drink? What am I supposed to take? Is there a drug I can take? And I'm very, very opposed to that mindset, because it sort of feeds that mindset of a quick fix, and it actually takes away from our awareness of our body and what we can do with our body. So if we can do things that get these vocal cords to vibrate freely, so you can just try going back and forth between no sound, sound. And what is the difference? and actually start feeling what the difference is. There's something that you're doing to create that difference. Can you do things in between? What can you do? So that at least starts waking up this muscle, these muscles, I should say, and then you can actually develop it. So for me, I'm in love with skill development. I don't like the word talent. I love to really embrace this thing about skill, because any skill, we can develop any skill. We can get better at something, whether it's communicating with another person or how we think or whatever it might be, playing an instrument or singing or speaking, right? But that thought, I think that is so empowering. Therefore, we're not necessarily victims of external circumstances. Yes, we've all had our traumas and things like that, but now I can develop a skill and I can actually use whatever's happened to me in life, or what I've experienced in life rather, I can use that to my benefit, and perhaps then become a role model and inspiration for other people also. But anyway, so now I went off a little bit there. But yes.
So basically getting to know your own voice better. So
yes.
Noticing what you're doing when you're making particular sounds, when you're whispering, when you're tired. How's your voice different? And maybe just trying different things.
Yes, and it's really helpful to just make sounds on a vowel, because when we do consonants, the tongue starts doing things. And that's part of the problem. So if someone has a voice dysfunction, it always goes hand in hand with a lot of tongue tension, a lot of tongue root tension, the way back. So that's why it's so helpful to do ooh, vowels, long ones like that, where the tongue becomes more and more relaxed. And that's a lot of the exercise that we do in my training then, to actually isolate these things and get the tongue out of the way. And then we can speak and say words in whatever dialect, accent, or language we speak, but there's still a sense of freedom. The voice still resonates.
So people can basically start to try that in their own front room. They can start, doing the vowel sounds, doing, just normal speaking tone.
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
That can start to get them more aware and maybe strengthen up some of the muscles.
Yes.
The vocal muscles.
Yes.
Yeah. And what would you say to anyone that's listening just now that has believed up till now that the way that their voice is the way it will be? It will stay.
Yes. Does that apply to other parts of your body too? What about your hamstrings? What about your biceps? Can you get stronger in your body? Of course you can. Can the body become healthier and more functional? Of course it can. But it takes training, right? And the question is how you train, and that's where the effective training comes in. But we can always affect things. And the beauty of it is that if we're talking about muscles, is that when you start something new, it always responds fast. But it has to be effective. That's a lot of what I do. I draw from my sports background, and sports training evolves all the time. The problem with singing is that singers tend to do what they've been told to do and always done, meaning sing some scales and try to hit some notes. So on my website, I actually have a free video where I go through why it's actually not all that helpful to sing scales and why that is. Because then you're so engaged in trying to hit notes and trying to sound good, and you actually don't develop the awareness and the muscle isolation so that you can develop effectively. And that's a big problem. People have sung scales for a long time, for years and years, and they feel they still don't sound good, and then they think it's lack of talent, when it really is a lack of effective strategy.
Interesting. So you actually travel the world doing classes. How did you get into doing that in the first place? Well,
so I was coaching one-on-one for a long time here in Los Angeles. And I realized people came to me, got tremendous results, and they all thought, wow, this is so different. And it wasn't that I set out to be different. I just did what I instinctively thought would be good for that person. How I want to engage the person in the discovery process so they can start feeling things. It's not me telling them do this and do that. They're not supposed to do things just because I say so, but, how does it feel? Okay, I can release this tension. Wow, the voice becomes freer. Oh, I get more range now. I get more power. And that's that beautiful discovery process that is also effective learning. So I realized I had a unique method, and I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I publish this? Because I knew people out there would be really it would help a lot of people. So then I developed a way then that people could do it online, go through the discovery process where they don't have to see me in person. They actually don't want anyone to be in the room to tell them, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. No, you're flat, you're sharp. No, you actually do want to be by yourself and go through and start feeling things, and then you recognize, wow, it actually makes a big difference. So the live events that I've been doing lately, I just started doing last year because people started getting to know me as some guy who's just online. Well, my background is as a performer. So since I built up a pretty good following, I started traveling then and doing events in different parts of the world where it really is more about, it's not just about the voice training, it really is about how we effectively become aware of fears and then how we transform them into high-level performance. So a lot of it has to do with peak performance training, meaning how do you perform well when it matters the most, which is so, people think it's just for performers getting up on stage and for their big event, or athletes. No, it's actually for life, because if you can be the person who becomes creative, you feel empowered, you feel free, you feel alive under moments of so-called pressure, stress, when other people might panic and freak out and become so fearful. That if you become that person who actually comes up with the ideas, the solutions to a big problem, wow, you become very, very valuable in your workplace, to your families, to your friends. That's the person we want to be around, who becomes resourceful in the midst of chaos, if you will. It's a very, very powerful skill, and that's also a skill to develop. How can you be, like, for example, a lot of people have performance anxieties, right? And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. High-level performers can have anxiety, but how do you transform that into go up on stage and, wow, something came out of me I didn't even know I was capable of.
So for anyone that would like to know more, you do have online programs.
Correct.
And you also do events, and I believe you're going to be in London on the 21st of May.
Yes, 21st of May in London.
So for people that would like to know more about that and more about your online programs, because they might want to do some vocal exercises.
Well, at least watch that free video I have, because that I think might be helpful. So that's at thesingingzone.com.
thesingingzone.com.
Yes, and when they get to that page, there is that free video that you can watch, where I go through that thing about scales and how you can effectively develop the voice. And then there is in the navigation bar at the top there, it says, I think it says events. So then you can see where the next event is. Fantastic. And right now it's London, and we're working on doing events in other parts of the world too.
Fantastic. Well,
so you come to Scotland, right?
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, no events planned yet in Scotland.
No, I figure people from Scotland, can't they come to London? It's not that far.
Well, like I say, for anyone that would be interested, go to thesingingzone.com. Is that right?
That's correct. The Singing Zone. Yes, don't forget
thesingingzone.com. Got that one right. I was listening. So, like I say, for anyone interested, go to the website and check out the products and also the events. Per Bristow, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I also have, by the way, my name, perbristow.com, which I have the blog with some interesting videos and interviews and things on there. So that might be interesting too.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.